Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Another week has gone by and a lot has been happening. Lots and lots been happening, and let's not waste time. Let's get everybody in and let's get started because we've got the clock ticking already. So we have over in Edinburgh, our Lloyd. Lloyd, how are you?
Very well, Roddy. Very interesting week.
For sure. We're going to be busy tonight, I think.
Aye.
And our favourite lawyer, always on standby. How are you? How are you doing, Eva?
Hi, Roddy. In good order, but as you said, very busy week, hectic, and very difficult to keep up with everything that's happening and note what is not happening.
Correct. And the Coatbridge Cavalier is in Brussels, I believe, in a pizza restaurant. Yeah, and he's already owes me £1.
It'll be €1, Roddy. I think you'll find.
Well, you're coming next week to visit me, so...
I know, it'll be crack. Can't wait.
It must be about €50 maybe now.
It's probably about that, but I'm in a cracking wee pizza restaurant, and it's great. I like it. It's very rustic, very au natural, because the owner's got his rabbit in the outside bit where we normally sit, and it's running about shitting everywhere, so nobody's allowed out there. It's fucking roasting. What's going on? It's like exactly my kind of place. And I was only a wee place down the road for lunch yesterday with my mate, and it was a wee... It's like Ed de Bevnick's an American chain. You walk in and the wee French guy just glowers at you and insults you. And then you think, all right, that's an interesting start. The food was fantastic. Guy was brilliant. Great wine, great food. No complaints. Happy days. Free insults as well. What could possibly go wrong? Wonderful experience.
Well, I can guarantee when you visit me next week, there'll be plenty of insults. Plenty of
gin and pissy lemons. But that's another story.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Anyway, let's get kicked off, because this week, Lloyd, it was the King's Speech, the first one for the Labour Party down in the English Parliament in Westminster. Let's have a wee picture of the Crown that went in for the state opening of Parliament. There you go there, folks. All that pomp and ceremony. Were you impressed by the King's Speech, Lloyd?
Always. Every time Charlie opens his mouth, I'm agog. What a load of nonsense. I mean, for goodness sake, a state coach for the Crown. Could he not just carried it on his lap? No, on a more serious note, I think there were some interesting suggestions in the King's Speech, and I think that certainly the Scottish Parliament, the Senate, and possibly Stormont too, should be very wary of some of the proposals in the King's Speech for direct funding from Westminster to local councils and so on. All I see in it is an attempt on the run-up to the 2026 elections, the Labour Party trying to make use of the power they have at Westminster to undermine, as I said before, Scottish Parliament, the Senate and Stormont. But I think they'll have greater difficulty dealing with Sinn Féin than they will with either the SNP or indeed the Labour government in Wales.
Yeah. Did you see anything, Eva, in the King's Speech that you found interesting, something to look forward to for Scotland?
What I found incredibly interesting and completely disgusting as ever was the sight of that gold coach and that crown and the pomp and the circumstance and the jewels and the wealth, the way over-the-top wealth and majesty that was on show in a land of plenty where millions are in poverty. And what was most interesting for me was what was excluded from the King's Speech quite deliberately, an act on the part of Keir Starmer to not remove the two-child benefit cap, which quite frankly is disgusting, and it's a travesty for a party who claim to be for social justice. It would cost £2 or £3 billion to remove that cap throughout the UK. That's money that can easily be found almost down the back of the couch. Charlie, were he a monarch worthy of the name, he would hand over a crown and a couple of the jewels and sell them off, or sell a few of his palaces or castles and start to relieve the poverty that there is throughout his kingdom. But it just goes to show how little the Labour Party from Scotland have been able to influence Keir Starmer, because the Labour Party in Scotland claim to want rid of the two-child benefit cap, and they've not yet been able to persuade Keir Starmer to agree with them. Angela Rayner wanted it gone. Most of the Labour front bench in the past few years have made fantastic showpiece speeches about how wrong and unfair and how divisive that cap is. And yet suddenly they've had a multitude of excuses and explanations as to why it can't be done. It can't be done quite simply because they don't have the political will, and because they're cowards, and because they're playing to a particular audience, which is not, in the main, the people who would benefit the most from the relief of poverty. And that is your Labour Party for you in a nutshell. They would rather be there shaking hands, as we saw, all pals together, Starmer and Rayner shaking hands with Rishi Sunak and his pals, and they were all in the same club. Better Together, it's called. The warm and folding embrace of the British Union. That's what you've got to look forward to Scotland for the next few years. Getting power stripped from you, getting your resources bled dry, as those folk down there sitting nice and warm on the comfy leather benches, sook into a fellow who was born into great privilege and untold wealth and riches. And most of those people have forgotten their roots and forgotten what it was that they promised to do. So for me, the quicker that the independence movement of Scotland gets the finger out and recognises the challenges that face this country, the better.
Indeed, you know, $3 billion to get rid of the rape clause. Couldn't find it, can't afford it, but he found $3 billion to send to Kiev to help them further the American foreign policy. He's also told the Israelis that there's unlimited funds and support, but he can't get rid of the bedroom tax. He can't get rid of the two-child clause, or the rape clause, as they call it. But here's the thing: there was an amendment, and it's Scottish Labour Party policy, Phil, but not one of the Scottish Labour MPs backed the policy of their leader, Anna Sarwar, which just shows up the nonsense about Scottish Labour Party. There's no such beast.
No, it's not registered. It's there now because there was lots of observations that actually your headquarters is in England, so you don't really exist as a Scottish Labour Party. But the $3 billion, it's not going to Ukraine, it's going to the military-industrial complex. And do we need defence? Yes, we do, because when Trump comes back in and he's guaranteed to cut down funding to NATO, which means we have to stand on 2 feet, and it's about time we did. But, you know, we should do things differently. We should certainly not be engaging in proxy wars with anyone and supporting regimes that are doing evil. We should stop doing evil as well. That might be quite a good idea. But no, talking about Charlie's a knob on a stick. Ostentatious. You know, the UK monarchies, they talk about it bringing in lots of money, but Versailles brings in more money, and they don't have a king. You might have noticed the wee thing with a guillotine going on there a wee bit time back. So maybe we should borrow one. No, I don't advocate violence, but you know how it works. They're just a waste of space. He cancelled apparently his US tour because Big Charlie was too easy in a target, given what's going on in the States at the minute. Obviously, he's in serious trouble if he wanders over there. Monarch, waste of space. Not my king, not my parliament. Warm embrace. Thank you for that one, Eva. The warm embrace. Was it 80, 90 countries have left the UK? Over 180 dependencies. How many have asked to return? The answer is 0, friends. 0. Why? Because everybody's better off without. So why would we be better with? Well, the bottom line is we're better off without, and more Scots are realising that. And long may it continue. We will rise, like Maya Angelou famously said in her beautiful poem about, well, it's another story, but not dissimilar when you look at the history. So no, Charlie, Sling your hook, waste of space. And Balmoral, incidentally, just as we add on, is in trust, so they don't pay any tax when they pass it on. Because that's your friendly neighbourhood royalty for you. Sling it. You're not welcome here.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But you could, if you perhaps, Techie, can you stick up Kate Forbes? She found a couple of things, Lloyd, that she felt she could cooperate with the British government. Let's hear what Kate Forbes had to say.
We want to see a reset in the relationship with the UK government and have been really encouraged by the Prime Minister's early visit to Scotland and the willingness of his government to work with Scottish ministers. And we're pleased to see some of that respect in the King's speech. There are parts of the bills that we've already implemented here in Scotland, for example, nationalising railways and protections for renters, and there are other areas where we look forward to seeing more detail, such as around GB Energy and the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, where we then want to work as collaboratively as we can to serve the people of Scotland.
Yeah, SNP using words like collaborative, from collaborate. Were you encouraged by anything, Lloyd? I mean, I don't think our friends, as we make great reference to them, Mary Lou or the lovely Michelle O'Neill, would be quite as gushing in their praise of the British government.
Well, no, but the major difference between Mary Lou MacDonald and Michelle O'Neill is that they've served their time within their parties. They've risen within their parties because of the respect that people have for them, for the activism, their behaviour long before they were ever elected to anything. They were a firm part of the Irish unification movement. I'm always deeply sceptical of people who appear from nowhere and are lauded in the mainstream press as being the next big thing. Do you remember a certain Kezia Dugdale who came from absolutely nowhere and suddenly was launched into the leadership of the Labour Party and then off to the John Smith Centre when she failed miserably? And I get the same kind of feeling about Kate Forbes. She came from nowhere. She has risen from obscurity to being, you know, the Deputy First Minister, for goodness sake, and the head of finance. I find it deeply worrying that anybody that is a card-carrying member of the leading party of independence would suggest that there was a requirement for a reset on British government terms. The only reset we need is the reset to campaigning for independence, for informing our people of the drain that's been made on their resources and informing them of the truth of why their circumstances feel so poor, because we are part of a union that takes from us and gives little back. I don't believe that Kate Forbes really, in her heart of hearts, can think in those terms, which is why I think, yes, there will be a reset, because that's what Kate Forbes was promoted to do. It's to reset Scotland as a region of the United Kingdom and not to lead us to independence and our flag flying outside the United Nations building in New York. I have no faith in Kate Forbes in any way whatsoever.
Yeah. This maybe is like this week there was a survey come out, an attitude survey, Eva, that showed how it's dropped dramatically from 2014 when Alex Salmond left the SNP, how trust in the Scottish government is an all-time low. There's no coincidence. It's as they become less efficient at government, as they've moved away from independence, as they've moved to gender ideology, as they've abandoned all the core principles of the once great party, that the Scottish voters' attitude to them is, we just don't, you're as bad as the rest, we don't trust you. No surprise, is it?
Well, if you slightly take this in stages and look at that clip from Kate Forbes in context, if you didn't know the party she represents, there are no clues in that clip to tell you that she's a nationalist and a supposed supporter of independence for our country. It's not there. It's a bland clip that could have been said by any one of a handful of members of the Scottish Parliament that are prominent in all different parties, because it's not about independence for our country, which should have been front and centre of everything that she does. But if you look at that on the one hand, and on the other, look at how Kate Forbes performs generally. This week, she gave an interview where she described how she was appalled as a new mother to learn of how poor the services for mothers suffering postnatal depression are in Scotland. And she's given this interview, which has been repeated several times on the radio. It's been mentioned in the press because it's supposed to be news that the Deputy First Minister has just learned that postnatal services for women are not what they ought to be. This is not news, as I and thousands of women have been screaming for decades. It's something that a number of Holyrood committees and different working parties and groups and charities and organisations have been talking about for a very long time. It isn't new. What is new in effect is we've a Deputy First Minister who's actually confessing that she's out of touch with reality. She's out of touch with what's going on the ground. And that leads me to the second point there about confidence in the Scottish Government having plummeted. It's plummeted because in the last few years, the Scottish Government has been less than competent. And it's been less than competent for the same reason that I'm criticising Kate Forbes. They're out of touch with the needs and the desires, the expectations and the values of the people of this country. They have displayed that over and over and over again. And that's where the enormous difference, the absolutely clear blue water is between the governments of Sturgeon, Humza Yousaf and now John Swinney and the governments led by Alex Salmond. Alex Salmond had a mission, and the mission was to prove that Scotland, with its own parliament, could govern itself competently and well. He achieved that. He achieved that twice. Since his departure, the Scottish Government has just gradually gone downhill. And it seems to me that actually their descent is now accelerating. And that is a great pity for the country, for the people, and for the movement. And that acceleration has got to stop. They have got to reach an end point and start building back up again. But the way that they build competence in government and the way that they recreate trust in government has got to be by doing something different than what they've done for the last 10 years. It has to be listening to people who know what they're doing, such as Alec Neil in the context of housing, such as Anne-Marie Ward in the issues surrounding drugs, such as innumerable experts in respect of tackling poverty and inequality, experts on education, the people on the ground that know what's going on, know the score and know the solutions, and start listening to these folk and implementing their solutions immediately with all due haste. Otherwise, 2026 won't just be a bloodbath for the SNP, it will be annihilation for the independence movement because the unionists will take over. And that is what Starmer is working towards with his Council of the Nations and the Regions, because his intent, to all intents and purposes, is to reduce Holyrood to nothing more than a glorified council office. Yeah.
It's to try and make it the equivalent of an English county council. That's what they're going to do with Stormont, the Senate, and Holyrood, is to try and bring it to equivalence of the Northumbrian County Council. And if you can't see that coming, folks, you're mental. It's coming. Here's the thing, Phil. We've spoken for several years, 3-4 years on here, that the SNP were heading for a disaster. They didn't listen. We warned them about their gender woohoo, about this being, dropping independence for gender. And it's now chickens are coming home to roost. The people that Nicola Sturgeon preferred to surround herself with while she got people that is out the party. Now we find one Cameron Downing. Stick it up, Techie. This is the picture at the National Portrait Gallery. Couldn't we put up the one in the National Portrait Gallery? There he is, Cameron Downing. One of the ones she surrounded herself with. 6 years for a horrific sexual assault. And it's not the only one. There's been other ones. We know about Linden in North Lanarkshire, Mark Kerr in North Lanarkshire, another guy was thrown in jail for 6 years. These were the people that she surrounded herself with. Surely now they've got to come out and do a bit of mea culpa and have a clean out.
Well, as we discussed and I've mentioned several times, and if anybody who's a student of how politics really works, Cameron Downing has just been sentenced, well, still to be sentenced for understand, but found guilty Trials went ahead. So I don't want to say too much, but
I get 6 years.
however,
6 years.
the trial is over. It's just
No,
sentencing.
no, no.
Oh, you got 6 years. Okay.
Downing gets 6 years. This is another one today.
Oh, Jesus God.
Another Cameron.
Well, here's the thing, though. We've talked about this, Cameron. What is it with people with surnames as first names? Anyway, never mind. It's not a laughing matter. It's pretty horrific because how it works in politics is if you are in politics, what you want is control. That's how political parties work. And if you've got something on someone, they will do what you say. This is why the SNP are behaving the way they're behaving. Absolutely appalling. This is the same guy who had decapitate turfs? That was the guy behind the Somerville. That's another Cameron Allen. We're coming to him too as well. It's absolutely staggering. You would think it's why is this happening? Well, the bottom line
guy here that held up the form saying decapitate terrorists, and the SNP didn't want to hear about it, and Kirsten Oswald and the others that were in, and Alison Thulis and Stuart MacDonald blanked it. This guy gets 6 years today. This is Friday. Today.
For Jesus.
He drugged a
murder.
Guy.
This is.
No, he didn't. That's not what happened.
Well,
Sorry,
right, tell me which one.
Go for it.
Right, Cameron Downing has been sentenced to 6 years for a series of assaults. That's him there. Right. Cameron Downing is the person who was the equalities officer for the, I think, London SNP, albeit perhaps briefly, and perhaps also an equalities officer in Edinburgh SNP, and he was out for Indy. He's been photographed often, particularly with Nicola Sturgeon. So as you've seen, he had his portrait in the National Gallery. I understand it's still there. So that's him, Cameron Downing.
Yeah, the other one, Cameron Allen.
Well, we'll get to him. Cameron Downing, it has also been confirmed, is that the offences of which he's been convicted and sentenced to 6 years
horrific
and the period between 2016 and 2023. In 2022, however, Cameron Downing made a video where he explained he'd had help because he'd gone for therapy or counselling to the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre. This means that he, I think, posing as a non-binary person, was able to access services that some women thought were for women only at the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre, which at that time was being run by Mridul Wadhwa, the Indian trans-identifying male who remains in a post which was for women only. How he remains in that post is an entirely different subject, but beggars belief as equally well as the fact that there seem now to be a number of people who were very friendly with the leadership of the SNP that have fallen very seriously foul of the criminal law and have been convicted of offences spanning a pretty lengthy period of time. That's Cameron Downing. Cameron Allen was convicted today, Friday, along with another young man, of having drugged, raped and murdered a young Fife father. There is now speculation that Cameron Allen is the same person as is shown there in the photo with the Decapitate TERFs banner. Now, I don't know if they are one and the same person, but there are certain similarities that people in social media have pointed out. But whatever the truth of the matter, both Cameron Downing and Cameron Allen have been convicted of dreadful offences, and certainly Cameron Downing was at times very close to the leadership of the SNP, as were others who have been convicted.
And this is how it works. You're on mute, Rory, but this is how it works in politics and around the world. If you want to control people, you get something on them and they do what they tell you. Do what they're told. That's just how it works. And particularly, and I've talked about this before, Nicola is doing what she's told because the establishment have got so much on her and they could destroy her very easily. But why would you destroy someone? You keep them in power and you make it work for them. So this is how politics works, and that's the sad thing here. But this is horrific evil that's been committed, and that's why people get sentenced in this way. But let's go back to something we talked about before, because I want to go back to that last point. about Kate Forbes, because Kate Forbes, for me, the first thing, don't waste your time on this weasel. Do not waste it. Kate Forbes is talking about reset. Now, tell me one thing, Eva, is reset not a crime? And when you look at free ports, is that not exactly what she's doing? So no, let's prosecute this evil. She's a waste of space. So that's exactly what she's doing with our resources. Then secondly, so don't vote for this cap doffing shyster. Up the revolution, I'm with Frankie Boyle, and Kate Forbes speaks as a traitor would. Kate Forbes, you've sold out. You're not good enough. Don't you walk me. I will speak my mind if you walk in front of me. Cross the street if you see me, Kate Forbes. I'm not threatening violence. I will never do that. Okay, but I will call you out for what you are. I'd advise you to stay clear of me. So no, you're a pathetic excuse. It's not leadership. It's kowtowism, as I've described it. So no, Kate. Nah, you're just another weasel. You're just another tool of the establishment, and you're not good enough. So anybody who believes that, you're fooling yourself. Just as like, you should be aware of how we were all duped when Nicola took the mantle and then betrayed us, and Angus Robertson, and so many others. No, I will not forget. I do not forgive. You don't, something of that magnitude, a betrayal of that magnitude, when it matters to so many people, when it affects their lives and destroys lives. This betrayal is destroying lives, and you're culpable if you're part of it. So no, Kate, jog on.
Kate's one part of, going on back on the theme, the biggest downfall for the SNP, without a doubt, Lloyd, has been their slavish adoration of Stonewall and the gender woohoo. It's destroyed the party, the movement, and everything else. And we said it, we spoke about it, and we warned, but no one listened. This week, I found it incredible. The hypocrisy is just quite amazing. Techie, stick up Mary Black, one of the biggest promoters of this, who said it had been on the cards for years, the implosion, and as if she was, a voice in the dark. She was one of the biggest ones, because let's stick up our next one, because theirs are great. Remember, you can pee next to me, telling us how she knew there was an implosion coming. She's part of the problem. She's not part of the solution, is she, Lloyd?
Absolutely not. But, I remember seeing some of Mary Black's speeches from the 2014 campaign before she joined the Scottish National Party, when she was part of the Margot Mobile with Jim Sillars. And I was impressed. But then again, words are cheap. Making speeches is easy. There's a lot of people in the movement have achieved status because they've been able to string a few words together but never actually back it up with the action required. And Mary Black is that person. She's not an experienced politician, because being an experienced politician doesn't mean you spent 9 years at Westminster. That's 9 years being a parliamentarian. That's a whole different ballgame. She clearly has no ability for strategic thinking. She clearly has no abilities on development of policy, because she's never developed or produced or presented a single policy in those 9 years. Now, I find that quite extraordinary, because even during the 4 years I was in the Scottish Parliament, nearly every single member of the Scottish National Party group came up with a policy or proposal for a bill, or worked collaboratively to do those very things, because they were political in their head and they didn't see things as show business. And the fact of the matter is, Mary Black has been in Westminster show business for 9 months, and for 9 years rather, and she should now reflect and maybe go back to university, properly finish her degree, and find herself some useful employment out with the area where people require people of serious mind, who are not weather vanes, Mary. We need signposts. She is not that signpost. She is that weather vane. She is... how anyone in her position can discount entirely her contribution to the disaster that is the Scottish National Party now, particularly with her trenchant views on the issues of gender recognition, is beyond understanding. We're over the hill of that. But then again, you know, Mary and so many other people have been locked into something and committed to something which they knew, because they're not entirely stupid people, they know is complete nonsense, but it gets them a fan base. And a thing I read this week was, you know, someone described Nicola Sturgeon as being more like an influencer seeking a fan base than anything else. And Mary Black is exactly that. And what can you say? I feel heart sorry for Jim Sillars, because without Jim Sillars, Mary Black was a nobody. That's just a fact. Her opening speech in Parliament, written by Jim Sillars, she had on tap that years and years of experience, knowledge. You don't have to agree with everything that Jim says, but I'll tell you what, listen to it, analyse it, and 9 times out of 10, you'll find he's on the right track, if not 99 times out of 100. And I feel desperately sorry for him, because he gave her the leg up that allowed her to become what she was, because that particular branch of the SNP in Paisley, where she got the seat, was very, very firmly on the left, pro-independence, independence, nothing less was the cry from that particular branch. I knew a lot of them quite well. And they were delighted to get somebody that they saw was an ally of Jim Sillars. I can't imagine how they're feeling at this moment either. But sorry, Mary, go away.
You, Eva, have been fighting for equal rights and against the erosion of women's rights and all this gender woohoo. When you saw this from Mary Black and know that her past record, were you angry?
I was probably more disappointed than angry, quite frankly. And there's been other developments this week that disappointed and angered me in equal measure too. One of them is a survey of the levels of happiness, if you like, or well-being amongst women and girls throughout the UK. Mm-hmm. And you can research your own area to find out whereabout in the chart your own area lies. Clackmannonshire's in the bottom 10% in the United Kingdom in terms of well-being of Scottish women, or of women and girls generally. And it's because of high levels of violence and aggression towards women. It's because of comparatively low levels of educational attainment. And it's because of comparatively high levels of poverty. That's Clackmannonshire, with an SNP controlled council, an SNP MSP, and until recently an SNP MP. And these people, like Mary Black, have lost their way and they're out of touch. And that is the single biggest issue facing the SNP. They are particularly out of touch with women, especially when women become educated about what the gender recognition reform legislation meant and how the Scottish Government intended for it to be interpreted. Because by no stretch of the imagination do most people in the country believe that it's actually possible to change your sex. And most people in the country, particularly women, believe firmly that single-sex spaces are necessary for dignity, for safety, for protection, and just generally for everybody's well-being, but especially for safeguarding purposes. So with age, sometimes comes experience and knowledge, understanding, and a level of maturity. But you cannot be elected to be a parliamentarian, to go to Westminster, to be trusted by the electorate, to be paid a substantial salary, to be able to incur office expenses and expenses for staff, which over a period of 9 years runs into millions of pounds, and stand there wearing a T-shirt that has such a crass motto on it and expect not to have the opprobrium of thousands rain down upon you. Because to say you can pee next to me rides a coach and horses through all the safeguarding legislation and measures and protections that women and those who fight for women, because it's a man's fight too, have fought for a very, very, very long time. It goes back to the days of Elizabeth Fry, who wanted women to have women's prisons and not be incarcerated beside men for reasons which are plain to see. We have gone back to the days of Elizabeth Fry in Scotland. We had earlier this week a carry on about whether or not there were issues arising from female prison officers being required to search trans-identifying male prisoners. This should not be happening. But it's because of people like Mary Black that it is, and it's got to stop. She has got to go through a learning process, and I would suggest that she and others, including Nicola Sturgeon particularly, take themselves along sometime to some group therapy events where women and girls who have been victims of predators describe to them exactly what happened to them and what their fears are about being around strange men in places that men are not supposed to be in and where men are not welcome. Decent men don't invade women's spaces. So when you see a man in a woman's space, the chances are he's at it, in the famous but accurate words of Humza Yousaf.
Absolutely. Phil, I want to ask you another question, but I know you know Mary Black. Have you any comment on that article by Mary, which I found quite hypocritical?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Eva. Grey hair. We all agree with that one, Eva. But Mary came in as a kid. Let's not forget that. From a good family with good intentions. Let's not forget that. You know, that's absolutely fine. But I 100% agree, and we know some other contributors to what got her where she was, because she knew nothing about this. She did, and I know some of the people that studied at uni with her, and fair play, you got your degree in politics. But as a kid, right? I've seen it so many times in the professional world. You get a smart kid coming up with good ideas, aggression, articulation, and it's one of the greatest attributes you can have. If you can articulate your thoughts, if you can hold an idea in front of you and twist it around and articulate it and explain it to people, it's a magnificent skill. And Mary's got some of that, so she's a smart cookie. But what's her base? 6 months in a chippy and some charity work. Nope, doesn't cut it. You need to be in the real world. So leader is not in this equation. Wake up. I mean, anybody who thinks otherwise, if you're impressed by, you know, you're going to be conned. If you're impressed by this skit, you're going to be conned very quickly of what little you have. But I'm not critiquing Mary here. I'm critiquing the sheep that follow this projection, the projection of this leader or young buck who gets it right. You're getting it right some of the time because you've been fed the line. You're getting it wrong because you go off on a campaign that has got nothing to do with Scottish independence and establishing an independent nation. You're off on some other. If you want to die on that hill, as SNP have. Mary has died on that hill politically, and many have. And you know, I have some support for them. I know some trans kids, genuine trans kids, and I will not decry the support that we need to give these kids. But I will decry the blind, delusional virtue signalling that has attempted and partially destroyed the hard-fought for rights for women and girls in safe spaces. We have got to do that. We've got to do that. There's so many on the same bandwagon as we've been discussed before in the SNP that have joined in this tirade. And for me, you know, now that you're out of politics, Mary, I wish you well. Welcome to the real world. Let's see how you go on.
I Absolutely. I mean, I think we should take some, the movement should take some responsibility for that. If you like an analogy of it, there was a young boy that played for the famous Glasgow Rangers, who by design at the age of 17 got thrown in against Liverpool and Ajax. And this boy had been getting chased by Man United. I'm talking about Liam King, Man United and Bayern Munich and all sorts of stuff. He was destroyed because he was put in too early and given too much responsibility. And you know, for every Leon King or every Wayne Rooney who at 17 or every Pele at 17, there's 1,000 kids that get thrown in too early. And I think people like Mary Black and others within the SNP in that grouping, that we allowed them to go in too quickly to a situation and an environment that was way out of their ken and inability to
Sorry, Roddy, can I interject here? Because I've seen this in the professional world. No, I wouldn't give a fuck. Sorry. Oh, God, there's me sworn again. Sorry about that. But you see it in the professional world, and what happens in situations like this? You get some young buck coming in who's smart, articulate, intelligent. They come out with all the glib sound bites that are ahead of the game. They're dancing, they're driven. And people ask you questions. Oh, they're really switched on, aren't they? It's a question.
Oh, you're going frozen, Phil.
Okay, sorry.
Right, well, you're back in.
But basically, what I'm saying is, there's a and it's all they're almost. I'll cut out then.
Yeah, we keep losing you, Phil. We're losing you there. Lloyd, but that's it. Was she promoted too quickly?
She wasn't prepared for what happens to people when they go to Westminster. I mean, let me tell the story again. 11 SNP MPs went to Westminster in 1974, fire in their belly, and by 1979 the country had rejected them entirely because they got sucked into the system and blown out the backside of it. And that's what's happened to Mary Black. But let's remember what really happened around this. Mary wasn't a member of the Scottish National Party. There were certain people on the periphery of the movement, not part of the party, but peripheral to the movement, who attended lots of meetings, never knocked on a door, never got anybody to go out and vote. They spoke to meetings that were full of people that were already on their side, who put into the mix, no, the SNP needs to open up its selection process to allow people, all people, to join in. This was the inclusivity that we had developed during that period. Now, that set alarm bells ringing in my head for a number of different reasons, primarily the fact that I know what happens in these circumstances from when it's happened in other countries. Now, the SNP had, by that time, it had quite, but a less rigorous vetting process than say, when I was vetted in 1999. Considerably less robust for many, many different reasons. But immediately you opened up effectively the candidacies for anybody, then you got Mary Black and Tommy Shepherd and John Nicholson and these charlatans who had never been part of the party, did not have a real connection with the people of the country, certainly had no real connection with the patriotic activists of the Scottish National Party that I had grown up in. And as a result of that middle class interference, because that's all it was, because there were a few people who had maybe stopped playing as many games of golf or going to art house cinema films because they were going to meetings during the referendum campaign, believed that they should have their shot. And in some ways, Mary was one of the ones that slid under the door because of that madness. Now, fair enough. People who had been active and committed during the referendum, allow them at least to go through the vetting process. But what you had to do was have a robust vetting process. The SNP did not. And as a result of that, we are where we are.
Correct.
It's all down to that, and we got Mary because of that.
Correct. I can say that in East Wren, we had the least winnable seat in Scotland for the SNP, and we had the same guy who stood every time because no one else wanted it. It was, But as soon as, after 2014, boom, in arrived Kirsten. I've got to tell you, the Barrhead News and Uplamore were not in favour, but we were outvoted because the other branch had more votes than us, and she'd been parachuted in there. What happened there? What a disaster! What a disaster! Eva, but Mary's not alone and shouldn't be taking the blame on her own. There are others who are suddenly been finding that, oh yes, it was all, this was wrong, and trying to rewrite history and pretend they had no part in it. I'll let you name them. If not, don't worry, I will.
Well, two that spring to mind immediately are Stuart MacDonald and Alan Smith, both of whom blocked me on Twitter several years ago. I think that they blocked me because they thought I was A, transphobic, but B, probably because they understood that I was far more determined to see independence in my lifetime than perhaps they were. And as I've said here and in other places, I'm happy to debate both of them. In fact, I'll do both at the same time on independence and the route to independence. Because what they've both done in common with Mary Black in the last couple of weeks is they've turned on their own party now that they've been rejected, or in Mary's case, stood down. And they're trying to spill the beans, knowing perfectly well that they were both in comparatively senior positions for several years, and they are as responsible as anybody else for the demise of the SNP. They're trying to elide and excuse themselves from blame. It's not on. The people of Scotland have got long memories. Alan Smith lost his seat because he was a useless MP. He also lost his seat because he did absolutely nothing to advance the cause of Scottish independence. I don't know so much about the ins and outs of Stuart MacDonald's seat, but I suspect that something similar applies. Now, these people, Mary Black, Stuart MacDonald and Alan Smith, should actually start speaking to people within the wider movement and explain what it is that they are now going to do to ensure that Scotland achieves its independence, because that's not going to happen by them sliding into a Holyrood seat, whether it's a constituency or a list seat in 2026. Perhaps that's what's in their game plan at the moment, but that on its own won't bring independence. I'd like to see these people write something constructive and explain why it is that we don't yet have that constitutional convention that's been promised for years, what it is about the special relationship that Alan Smith claimed that he had with Euro MPs that means that he thinks that Scotland can creep back into the European Union at some indeterminate point in the future. And what are the nuts and bolts that Stuart MacDonald and Mary Black and Alan Smith and Ian Blackford and Nicola Sturgeon and Stephen Flynn and the whole lot of them are so clever? What is it that they're going to do to achieve our independence? Because before the election, it was going to be vote SNP for independence because we've got a plan. The plan is that we're going to ask Keir Starmer for a Section 30. As far as we know, he has not yet been asked, but we also know that he's going to refuse it. We said that this would happen before the election. The election's passed. What is now the SNP plan for independence? I'm strongly suspecting the SNP plan is for Devo Max and to try to hold on to the powers that Holyrood currently has using that reset that we started speaking about at the beginning. So if that's what it is, would it not be fair and honest and open and a position of integrity for those now in the SNP to just come clean and say that they've given up on the question of independence and leave it to the rest of us to sort it out?
Yeah, possibly. But here's the reason, one of the reasons, another thing this week, Phil, which came out is that plans have been announced to build your sort of thing, a hydro energy plant in Loch Law. It will produce enough electricity and energy to power 4.5 million homes. Here's the thing, Phil, there's only 2.1 million homes in Scotland.
Yes, it's the design for England. It's the design for England. It's the design. It's the design.
And how much will we make out of it?
Nothing, because we pay more per kilowatt hour in Scotland than you do in England, because that's how it's designed. Even though most of it's generated here, we're 5.3 million people. We are 8-point-something% of the population. We've got 96.5% of the oil. We've got 65 more than that of the gas, and we've just got pretty much everything that's going. So this is all about stealing Scotland's power. Hydro, this is something we've talked about for a long time. I've been looking at this for a long time, and hydro energy. If you've got mountains and water, which Scotland has in abundance, what we do is when wind blows at night time or at any time, we put a wind generator and we pump the water back up the mountain, and then you bring it back down again. It's not rocket science. It's really the Norwegians are doing it. Everybody's doing it with any sense, and we ought to be doing it. We are self-sufficient in energy. Scotland could be, if you want the green energy, which is a bit of a con, but if you want to do that, we could do that. But what we do have is an abundance of oil and gas. 96%, half of the oil, 65% of the gas, and all new findings will be in Scottish waters. So when I look at this, I think about, it's something you mentioned earlier in the last question. It sounded more like the Chicago way. It sounded a little like Sean Connery, and at Sinn Féin, what we've got to do is take control in the fight. And for me, we all know that independence is the only way that we can take control. They will continue to undermine us, and to render our... What is the Scottish Government? It is, by definition, even now, even at its best, even at its absolute best, a devolved government is an arm of the British government. That's the reality. So you play that game, you play their game, and you will lose that game. That is why they fear. That's why they changed the game when we started, when we actually came very, very close. We came close to winning in 2014. That's when the game changed. That's when they got serious. And that's why we should adopt Sinn Féin attitudes. We should be stronger than Alex. As much as I revere Alex, as much as I respect him, as much as I know he's the best we've ever created, I think we need to go beyond that. I think we need to understand what Sinn Féin are, what they did, and why they will succeed sooner than we will. And it's not about to hell with violence, but it's to be resolute, like Gandhi did. You queue up to get hit in the head with the sticks. You've got to take it. They will not give you your freedom. You have to take it. We have to take it. We know this. So he pulls your knife, you pull a gun. He puts one of your men in the hospital, you put one of his in the morgue. And that's how you get Capone. That's the Chicago way. Or the Coatbridge way, as it's commonly known.
Or the Barhead way. Trust me, Barhead way as well. I'm not quite so as non-militant as you, but that's another story. But here's other things going on. There was a guy called, I can't remember Greg's second name, but he was on the BBC. He's the CEO of Octopus, Lloyd. And he said that, if things were done properly, he'll never be back on the BBC, incidentally. Scotland would have the cheapest energy in Europe. Stick it up. Have we got a wee video with that? Techie, I'm not sure. But market reforms could give Scots the cheapest energy in Europe, the Octopus boss said, Lloyd. One, he'll not be back in the BBC. And two, it's not something that's going to be promoted anywhere, is it?
No, it's not. But, Roddy, there's a certain absurdity in us quoting a guy who runs an energy company in another country when we, as members of the independence movement, have known this to be true since we discovered the oil in 1969, or when Tom Johnson built the first hydropower station. We've known this, but we don't say it, and the SNP don't say it. We need to be hammering this home day in, day out, because it is true. What he said is true. But why are we quoting him? We need to be telling our people and reinforcing it in our own minds that this is a reality. We can give people free power. That's a fact, if we choose to do it. And if we have the power to do it. And the only way we'll ever have the power to do it is when we become independent.
Absolutely.
And in some ways, it's kind of circular here. How do we become independent? By informing our people of the realities of the situation that we find ourselves in. But we have had, certainly for the past 2 decades, a collection of politicians who supposedly are spreading the good message, but who appear to be bored rigid with constantly saying the same things, the things that we need to be saying to people. It's Scotland's oil, it's Scotland's energy, it's Scotland's whiskey. Only 8% of the money that we give to London comes back to us. That's why we've got 1 in 4 children in poverty, 1 in 4 pensioners in poverty, why we don't have a system for building, particularly housing for essential workers in areas where we are inundated with second homes and holiday homes and Airbnbs. These are the bread and butter issues that everybody said, oh, we've got to talk about bread and butter issues. How much more bread and butter is it than talking about cutting people's bills? But our politicians don't do it because they get that smirk from the unionists, or they get that smirk from the television interviewer or the journalist, and they crumble to the smirk, because the smirk that says, oh, come on, we've heard this before. The answer to you've heard it before is aye, and you're going to hear it again and again and again and again until it sinks in, not to the journalists, to our people. It's, you know, but sorry, but
Camden.
Yes, we need. What do we need? Independence, nothing less. We know that. Everything else is just chitter chatter.
Yeah.
And playing within somebody else's rules. Consequently, we are quoting people from other places to confirm the arguments we know are already true.
Mm-hmm. I remember actually in 2014. I remember in 2014, Jim Sillars at one of the meetings talking about moving petrol to £1 a gallon to increase tourism. So when people cross the border, they can fill their car and they can tour all around Scotland and, you know, go to different places that they can't afford to at £7 or £8 a gallon. And they'll go there and that'll create jobs, that'll blah, 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 blah.
The point that Jim was making, that made at the end of that, because he used that regularly in speeches during the campaign, was that increased revenue would allow us to build the infrastructure that we don't have, that would actually allow us to have a proper tourist industry.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah, and also, as you said, and it would also give our haulage companies an advantage as well, and our farmers an advantage. Yeah. And we need, you know, folks, there's only one thing we need. It begins with I and ends with E. And then it all starts to get better. Independence, nothing less. Keep saying it, folks, and keep believing it. Eva, the clock is kicking on and clicking on, and I want to get to it. We've been shouting you more than anybody. I don't know how many years you've been saying it. We need a constitutional convention. You said it for years. We talked about it. We've all agreed. We've done it. And this week, Business in Scotland come up with a great new idea, probably a money maker for them. They want to have a constitutional convention. They want to run it. Why can't they go and speak to others like Salvo, like all under one banner, and say, let's get together, guys, and let's do a joint, and then we'll pull in the politicians later. But they want to go off on their own.
I can't tell you why they're not speaking to other people. I just know that I'm disappointed but not surprised that the item I read has a footnote to the effect that the cost of a constitutional convention will be £2 to £3.5 million. Why should it cost anything? We're talking about people coming together to talk about how to create the future destiny of our independent Republic of Scotland. It should be a coming together of like-minded and hearts that beat in a similar fashion. We should be able to gather, whether it's in George Square or Glasgow Green or Princess Street Gardens, and shout it from the rooftops. But that ain't going to happen when you've got the likes of Business for Scotland or Believe in Scotland organising marches and rallies that appear to be deliberately arranged to try to take the thunder out of the rallies and the marches that all under one banner have been doing for the last decade. Or when people arrange events that clash with Hope Over Fear, who've been going for the same length of time. The way to unite the movement is exactly what it says on the tin. Unite the movement. And fracturing the movement by talking about all different sorts of competing conventions is only doing the unionist job for them. So Gordon McIntyre Kemp should lift the phone to half a dozen folk within these different organisations, all party, no party, and they should all get together under one roof. I'm quite happy to chair the meeting. I'm quite happy to crack their heads together, because that needs to happen, and it needs to happen today.
Correct. And I've got to tell you, folks, that Indie for Indie will be taking a leading role in anything that unites the movement. Not for there, but for uniting the movement. The clock kicking on, but I don't want to stop. I want to keep going for a wee bit longer today, Phil. This week, big week, David Davis, the Tory MP, once again used parliamentary privilege and named, which we had done in Dundee, I've got to say, when we were on the road, folks. And I'm going to take the blame so you don't go and arrest any of my friends or charge any of my friends. I said it in Dundee, that Liz Lloyd was the leak. David Davis said it under parliamentary privilege. And he also named other names like Evans and all the other ones that colluded against Alex Salmond, and the ridiculous situation where the Lord Advocate sits on the Cabinet of Scotland. Will it have any difference? Will it make a difference? Will anything happen to sort it?
No, the reason it won't happen is because the establishment are controlling this. They set it all up, they enabled it, and it serves their purposes. So all of the shysters, liars, troffers, and compromised individuals who are involved in this are all culpable in the attempted destruction of a man who was innocent of what he was charged of. Alex, like I said, I said last week, he's been a very naughty boy. I don't want that to take out of context. He has not done what he's been accused of. He's just, for me, all the charges were thrown out, right? And when you read, if people actually were allowed to talk about it and know about it, they would see why they were thrown out. It's absolutely disgusting what was attempted by Nicola, by Angus Robertson, by the Alphabetis. I will never forgive you. That's why you're persona non grata to me. It's why you will be finished. You are finished. You should be finished. And I mean that in a political sense. I'm not talking about in a bada bing, bada bong way, you know. I'm not talking about mafioso. I'm saying I think about growing a moustache. I don't know, but and we're building something in Sicily next, so I might be going there next. So bada bing, bada bong. So let's see how it works. So if you want anything sorted, give us a shout. You know what I mean? Anyway, never mind. No, it's, the bottom line is this is how the world works, and the quicker people cotton on to this, and we're not like you pink fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows. Stop that nonsense. Stop it. You stupid bastard. Stop it now. Wake up to the reality of life. And it's a harsh reality. So look at the American situation. America, one of the greatest civilizations we've created, it's in decline. Read Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's a coming. And look at all the indicators. And you have got a situation where you've been presented with the choice of Trump or Biden. Really? Really?
Did I say
it's not by accident,
Starmer?
Folks.
We're not really, we can't talk.
But that's not we though, Roddy. That's not us. That's England.
Unfortunately,
and do you know what? Living in Belgium, and as we've just travelled Europe with Scotland, in Germany, they love us. They do not like England, and I feel sad for that because my mum was born in London. You know, if I was any good, I could have played for England, and they could have used it. No, I don't. They could have done me a better team, but you know, I've got no real animosity towards the people, but their choice in politicians. Oh, go on, jog on, you useless waste of space. You are the problem, man, and you're duped more than the rest. But we in Scotland are just coming out of this, and it's cyclical. We're now getting a second wind, and the positivity, people and friends, is that we are moving towards where we need to be, in charge of our own destiny, of our own people, of our own future, and understanding what's best for us. not for anybody else. Don't pretend that it's about anything else. Put your own house in order first, and that means independence, nothing less. Let's do it, folks. Let's rock and roll.
One of the other things this week as well, Craig Murray made clear that the Crown Agent, Lloyd, David Harvey, was seconded to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office from MI5. So we have a guy who's MI5 in charge of the Crown Office, who was part and parcel of this, and I call it a conspiracy to jail and imprison Alex Salmond, destroy the movement. And the ridiculous thing is that the SNP joined in the collusion against it. But we had an MI5 guy, and still have an MI5 guy in charge of the Crown Office, and that's why there are no prosecutions that could bring this to an end.
Yeah, well, MI5, MI6, Special Branch, whatever, all of it's the British state. And the fact of the matter is, this whole process was not begun to destroy Alex Salmond. It was to destroy the movement for national independence, which is why it's being dragged out. Alec, just because he was the figurehead, he became the focus of it to cause the initial damage. The reason it's being dragged out and dragged out and dragged out is a lot to do with Mr. Harvey, because as the Crown Agent, he had the final say effectively on the urgency of inquiries. Now, it's nothing new, and all these people that say tinfoil hat, conspiracy theory, look, MI5 exists. It is the internal, the domestic intelligence service. That's its description. It is funded by the British government to carry out British government policy. MI6 is the security and intelligence service which operates, or supposedly operates, entirely and completely overseas. It exists. For those of you that don't know it, go to BBC iPlayer. There's a series called Spook. Somebody look at that if you don't think these things go on. And, you know, I know it's uncomfortable for me, but I'm not going to last long enough. But some, you know, in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, when the history of this period is actually written, there are many, many revelations that we know to be true currently will become the standard text. But at the moment, for those who it makes feel uncomfortable, they don't want to face the realities. It's simple. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland has been an exploiter of foreign countries. It's in the period of its entire existence. When it got booted out of countries in the rest of the world, it came back here. It has plundered Scotland primarily, initially. And these are the words of the Duke of Marlborough to Queen Anne. We need them because I need their blood to fight the 7 Years' War. Effectively, we were used to colonize other countries by being forced off our land or forced into the red coat of the British Army to go and take other people's land. We carry no blame for that. The Irish carry no blame for that. The Welsh carry no blame for that. The English working class carry no blame for that. The ruling classes of England and their collaborators in Scotland carry all the blame for that. What is happening now is the same thing by other means. As I've said in this program a number of times, war is politics by other means, and politics is war by other means. What is going on here is a war against the independence movement, because the fright that was given not just to the British, but to the powers of the Western Alliance by, most importantly, not the result of the referendum, but the returning of 56 members of parliament out of 59 in the 2015 election, because that showed, particularly to NATO, the United States and the UK, that the movement was not dead. And it wasn't about that difference of votes. They had to find a way to quash the movement. And what they're doing now, considering the period of time that this has been going on, there is no question. This is a black operation. And let me just add this. So is Believe in Scotland.
Yeah, there you go. You heard it here first, folks. Eva, the clock is really beating us. I've got a couple items I want to go through, and very quickly, guys, because we really are against the clock. Mr. Speaker has turned around and said now that unless you're wearing a tie in Westminster, he will ignore you and you won't be able to speak. I mean, God almighty, Eva, are we going back to that stuff? Top hats next.
To whom does this rule apply?
The
does
MPs.
It apply to all MPs?
Yep.
Self-identifying male MPs, all male MPs, female MPs, who? He's just making a fool of himself. It's an absolute waste of time. I happen to consider that MPs should be smartly dressed. I have an open mind as to whether or not men should have to wear ties. But if that's all that he's got to worry himself about, then there's something seriously wrong at the heart of that Parliament.
Yeah, there sure is. Phil, it's been announced today that the ICJ is about to declare that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. They're saying that, you know, it's illegal, occupying the territories. But Starmer, our Prime Minister, says there's no restrictions in Israel as far as the UK is concerned. They will keep on supplying weapons. They will keep supporting them. Even though, now this is a guy who was the head of the prosecution service in England, who is a human rights lawyer. He is going to go against the largest, the highest court in the world. He's going to ignore it. So we are all of us, not just in this programme, but throughout the UK, we are now all complicit in a genocide and an illegal occupation.
True. We are complicit in genocide, and we have been complicit in illegal occupation for a very long time. We've been turning a blind eye because the card has been played, the Holocaust card. There was a brilliant, I can't remember the name of the journalist from the States. They had to be Jewish because you couldn't say this any other way. The Hebrew word for Holocaust is Shoah. Okay? And he came out with the phrase, there's no business like Shoah business. Because people were winning Oscars for Schindler's List, there's a whole bunch of them. Now, let us never, never forget the Holocaust. Let us never forget man's inhumanity to man. But you look at Finkelman, there's a brilliant guy, and I apologise for not doing him service. Norman Finkelstein, I believe is his name. And he's been a brave soul that stood up and spoke about this from the very beginning. He has been removed from his professorship. He is the child of Holocaust survivors. And the very principle of that lesson he brings to bear upon what's happening in Palestine. Norman Finkelstein, I salute you, sir. You have the courage of principle, of value, of standing up for what is right and what is true. We are all cowards in comparison. We need to speak the truth. All of us. There was a book actually written that your average American commits 3 felonies a day. The laws are so ridiculous. Felony's a crime in America. So in the UK it would be, for example, if a taxi rides about without a hay bale in its trunk, it's committing a crime because it's to feed the horse of the carriage. That was never repealed. You know, there's stuff like, well, I mean, I'm sorry, my apologies. Eva could probably correct me on this, but there are other examples. I don't pretend to be an expert on this, but I'm just giving you some shit.
Pushing a perambulator on a 4 wheels on a pavement is one of those crimes. I don't know if that's true.
Mental. The bottom line is we need to pay attention. We are being shystered. We are being ridden. We are being dictated to. And those of you who are depending upon mainstream media, more fool you. Don't come to me. Don't even talk to me. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste my time on fucking... Oh, sorry, I've done it again. Idiots like you. You're a clown. You're a fool. You think because you read the broadsheets and the red tops, you're getting the broad spectrum of what's out there. You idiot. You clown. You fool. You dupe. I was asked a question. The final point, I was asked a question when I was in Parliament. Can you give a summary of what politics is all about in 5 minutes? I went, no, I'm just not that bright. Sorry, mate, I just can't do it. But I know someone that can. His name's George Carlin. It's called The American Dream. And you gotta be asleep to believe it.
Yeah, I've got to say, we've got to actually re-educate you. And when I say keep it short, what I mean by keep it short. And when the emails start coming in about the expletive deletives, it's me that's got to answer them. Okay, last thing here, Lloyd, and I want to make it because Elon Musk, not everyone's cup of tea. I happen to like the guy. I don't know him personally, but he seems all right to me. He has come out this week. He was offered a secret deal by the EU to censor users without notice, to restrict our freedom of speech about, mainly, I think, about Ukraine and Gaza. He refused to do that. He's now going to face financial penalties. However, he did tell us that all the other social medias, platforms, folks, all of them, with the exception of Telegram, have accepted the deal from the EU and will restrict your freedom of speech. So be aware.
Well, that's an interesting story for all these people who believe that the land of milk and honey happens to be within the European Union. Frankly, it's not, most especially after the re-election of, well, what shall we call her? You know, Mrs. von der Leyen, who wants to take us to war. The European Union is not what it was, but it never was going to be. It was never going to last forever. It was never going to be that land of milk and honey after Jacques Chirac and the shift to the left in the European, well, what was then European Economic Community in the 80s. The dream of the European Union is over. It does not work for the people. No. And thank goodness Elon Musk has told the truth. Is this what independence in Europe means? Don't think so.
No, exactly. Folks, the clock's really beating us. Eva, my dear friend, have you anything to say, anything you'd like to mention before we go?
Only that I'm looking forward to the phone ringing off the hook in the next couple of days with calls from Gordon McIntyre Kemp and John Swinney. And obviously, I know that Colette Walker will be in touch with me and Sarah Salyers, and we'll all get together next week and have the beginnings of the Constitutional Convention.
Yeah. And Santa Claus will be coming down your chimney on 25th of December, folks. Right, we're out of here. I hope you've enjoyed this, folks, as much as I have with my dear friends here. We haven't covered everything that we wanted to cover this week. We never could. We never can get through everything that needs mentioned. But I just want to say one last thing. Prime Minister Orban of Hungary has went to China. He went to Kiev. He went to Moscow. He went to Mar-a-Lago to try and bring about a peace settlement. He's been condemned by the European Union because he dared to try and bring peace and end the killing. That's where we are, folks. You get condemned, and they're talking about removing Hungary's voting rights in the EU for daring to try and bring about peace and end the killing. Now, for an old peacenik like me, anti-war guy, I cannot find the words to describe my disgust. I will be against the EU my whole life. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you. And to you watching, please, you and yours, take care. We'll see you next week.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.